Tim Talks About Everything, and today I'm talking about famous trees. Trees that are so famous, they're actually worth going to visit. Aside from the usefulness of a tree, trees are so old they date back thousands of years. They are among the largest and the oldest organisms on the earth, and they are definitely worth visiting. So whether you are in another state or whether you're in another country, I think it's worthwhile to find out what are the most famous trees that exist in that state or in that country. The funny thing though is a lot of times if you ask people what are the most famous trees in your country, they will draw a blank. They have no idea what are the most famous trees because they don't really think of trees as famous. When we were visiting Israel, I was talking to our guide about my interest in trees and I said, I want to visit the most famous trees that you have here in Israel. And he said, well, we don't really have any famous trees. And then throughout the next week, he proceeded to point out, and he didn't even realize he was doing it, he proceeded to point out 3 different trees that were very famous that were in Israel. You have a lot of people that decide, I'm going to go to all the national parks in the United States, and that's their quest. Other people might say, well, I'm going to visit all the state capitals in the United States. Other people might say, well, I have this certain bucket list of countries that I want to go to for X number of reasons, or so many mountains that I want to climb. And we have all these different ideas of things that we would like to do, lists that we're working on. Me, I'm interested in visiting the most famous trees, the things that happen around those trees, the beauty of those trees, the significance of those trees, the story that those trees tell. Come along with me. This is Tim Talks About Everything, and today I'm talking about trees, famous trees. We're going to start our tour of the famous trees that I recommend that you go see by going to California to see the redwoods and the sequoias. Are there any other trees that are as famous as them in the United States? We wanted to see the General Sherman tree, but unfortunately when we got there, that area was closed down, so we didn't get to see it. It's probably the most famous of all, but we did have other places that we could go to. So we saw the Shrine drive-through tree, the Founders Grove, the Founders Tree. There are multiple parks where you can see these magnificent trees, but my favorite park of all the places that we went was the Calaveras Big Tree State Park, mainly because easy access, plenty of parking, no crowding, and nice, uncluttered trails without a lot of extra people, and you can get a picture with a tree without 10 other people standing there. So that's really nice. Now there are parks with a lot more fame, but parking can be a real hassle in some of those places. And in fact, you might even have to park someplace else and be bussed in to some of those parks. So I like my visits to be a little more autonomous. The second tree I think you need to see is the Joshua Tree. Now we didn't go to the Joshua Tree National Park because we saw plenty of Joshua trees on our way to the highway, and you see countless Joshua trees, and you get to see the Joshua Tree up close in various places. Now at dawn and at dusk, their outlines play havoc with your imagination and some very sinister and eerie shapes. And I can see why some people would say that the desert was haunted. Next would be the saguaro cactus. Now these pictures were taken in Arizona, and we did not take a special trip to the Saguaro National Park. These pictures actually came from the grounds of the library in Cave Creek in Arizona. It is amazing to learn how old these cactuses are, and that they are really around 100 years old when they formed that first arm. So you don't necessarily have to go a long way out of your way to see these trees and to see them up close, but I definitely recommend that you see them and you take some really nice pictures of them. Now Michigan has a tree that is so famous, it is stamped into a quarter of the United States money. Now in many ways, this tree is like a million others, but it has an inspiring characteristic that makes it very unique. Erosion has washed away most of the soil around it, but this tree just keeps hanging on and hanging on to life. Now, there might be times in your life when it seems like nearly everyone has just disappeared. they've just eroded away out of your life and deserted you. In those times, that's when you discover who your true friends are and the source of your strength. Now, I saw this tree which grows on the top of Chapel Rock when I took a tour along with my wife of the Pictured Rocks National Shoreline. It was spectacular, even on a very rainy day. Next, we're going to go out east to the Angel Oak Tree. Now, this graceful 300 or 400-year-old live oak is on Johns Island. It's thought to be the largest live oak tree east of the Mississippi River. Visit early in the morning to avoid the crowds and get the best pictures of the tree that you are able to get. Something I failed to do. I didn't show up really early. I got there when there were 100 other people there. If you visit Charleston, this tree is a sight to see, but don't plan on bringing a blanket and spreading it out underneath the tree and having a picnic there, because there are a lot of rules of things that you can't do and you can't bring, and you can't have a camera tripod, and you can't have a blanket, and you can't have a picnic. That's fine. Just go and see the tree. That's the main attraction. Have your picnic somewhere else. Wormsloe Drive. One of these live oaks all by themselves is impressive enough. But when you have 1.5 miles of them lining your driveway, it is enough to stop traffic to get a view. There are 400 trees in this driveway, and many of them are over 100 years old. This is the Wormsloe Estate just outside of Savannah, Georgia. The drive and the plantation are a must-see if you travel to Savannah. I'm just throwing this one in for a little bit of, dark humor. It's the Tree of Shame. Before we leave the United States to go overseas, I just want to mention the Tree of Shame at Deals Gap on the Tail of the Dragon, which is a road in Tennessee and North Carolina, kind of like right on the border. Now, this iconic road is beloved and feared by motorcyclists and sports car enthusiasts. There are 318 curves in 11 miles, so crashes are inevitable. As a warning, people started attaching parts from the crashes from the cars and the motorcycles on a tree at Deals Gap Resort Center. Now, I'm not showing the Tree of Shame because, well, I think it would be kind of shameful, but it is a famous tree that speaks volumes. I highly recommend Tail of the Dragon. I've been there several times and done this thing several times. Thankfully, never had anything put on the Tree of Shame. Now we go to Israel, and the tree I want to start out with is the tree that was a prop that was used in the movie version of Jesus Christ Superstar, part of which was shot at Beit Shean. In that movie, Jesus is hung on this cross. Now, Beit Shean is worth visiting, especially if you climb to the top of the Tell. You're rewarded with a view of this tree. We are on our way through the Negev to the back door of Jericho when we decided we wanted to see the sycamore tree. You know, we've sang that song as little kids growing up in church about Zacchaeus was a wee little man and he climbed up in a sycamore tree, and I wanted to see that sycamore tree. Well, okay, that sycamore tree is gone, and when we got to the place where they show you this is the sycamore tree, it didn't look like a very good place to take a picture, I'll just put it that way. There aren't very many trees in the Negev, and our guide told us that when he and his friends go four-wheeling, he tells them to meet him at the tree in the Negev, and they know exactly where that tree is. And that tree made a much better picture than the sycamore tree in Jericho. The area was just so cluttered and crowded, we couldn't even find a parking place. So it was kind of nice, though, to see Jericho and to see maybe a place where, okay, this is something happened here, something important happened here, and people live there, and it's still a thriving little city. And I was glad to be able to go through there, and we had a nice meal in Jericho, and we were very glad to be able to go in the back door, basically, of Jericho. And then finally, Gethsemane, the trees, the olive trees in Gethsemane. These trees date back to the time of Christ. Now, the Bible tells us that Jesus was arrested on the Mount of Olives. He prayed fervently to the Father. His disciples slept fervently. And it is, of course, impossible to know if these are the very trees that Jesus prayed under, but they do serve as a powerful visual for believers who visit. This is Tim Talks About Everything. I thank you. If you've watched this far, then you must really love trees like I do. A couple of books that I'll recommend. This one of my sons got me for Christmas. It's called Finding the Mother Tree, Discovering the Wisdom of the Forest. Written from a very scientific point of view, I'm assuming. And then this is kind of what got me started on the whole, I'm going to go visit the famous trees in the world. This is just called Tree. It's by this fella here, James Balog. I don't know how you pronounce his name. Sorry if I mispronounced that. But this is a giant book, and it has a lot of awesome pictures in it. This is Tim Talks About Everything. Go out and plant a tree. I have 42 trees that I've planted in my yard. See ya.